Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to this exciting conference. So today I would like to talk about, I'm KOHEI NAKAJIMA from the University of Tokyo, and today I would like to talk about physical reservoir computing and its relevance to embodied intelligence. So basically, I would like to introduce the concept of physical reservoir computing today, and especially I would like to focus on the motivation of this technique. And simply saying, this technique allows us to exploit natural physical dynamics as a computation resource. So let's see some example. So this video shows a typical behavior of soft robotic arm. And as you can see, it shows diverse body dynamics. And actually, this arm is picked up from the octopus robot, one arm, and it's immersed in the water environment. And the base part is actuated right now, and it shows passive body dynamics. And we argue that we can exploit these diverse complex body dynamics, natural physical dynamics, as a computational device based on the framework of physical reservoir computing. And today I would like to briefly explain the mechanism why this is possible. And to understand this, we need to understand the concept of reservoir computing. And the second point is, as I explained, this arm is not made for computation in the first place. So as I explained, this one is just one arm of the octopus robot. But in some sense, we can use this as a computer. And this suggests the flexibility of the framework of physical reservoir computing. And today I would like to especially focus on what is it good for. So we use this arm as a computer, but what is it good for? And to understand this, we need to understand the concept of embodiment. So today I would like to briefly explain these two concepts and move on to the introduction of the concept of physical reservoir computing. And if you have any questions, please stop me. Is this interactive? Okay, maybe you can just stop me and ask me a question. Okay, or maybe you can write down in the chat, maybe, and later I will read it. Okay. So, okay, we have one comment in the chat. Okay, thank you. Okay, then let's start from the first concept, the concept of reservoir computing. Okay. Okay. So this diagram shows the typical system construction of the reservoir computer. And simply saying, reservoir computing is the framework for recurrent neural network training. And as you may already know, to train recurrent neural network, you use backpropagation through time method. And usually you tune all the weights inside the network. But in the reservoir computing approach, we don't tune all the weights, but we only tune. We adjust the readout parts only. And this diagram suggests very simple case. So today we only consider the simplest case. So the readout part is a linear summation. But of course, there are lots of variations right now. So you can, for example, put some nonlinear functions or feed forward neural network here. But anyway, we only adjust the readout. And simultaneously, we put some huge amount of nonlinear elements coupled randomly in the middle layer. And this part is called reservoir. And this part forms high-dimensional nonlinear dynamical system. And we don't adjust weights in the reservoir part. And also, we have weights from the input to the middle layer. This weights is also not tuned usually. And because we are only adjusting this readout part, the training is very fast and stable. in general. And as you can see from this system construction, the important point is that the overall computational power depends on the reservoir dynamics, the nonlinearity in memory of the reservoir dynamics. So this framework is somehow can exploit. So the important point is for this framework is that we can exploit the intrinsic dynamics of the reservoir for computational purpose. And as always, we have two typical system constructions. First one is open loop, and second one is closed loop. So in the open loop case, so we have input injected to the reservoir, and you drive the reservoir, the dynamics, and you pick up the response of the reservoir. And by adjusting this readout part psi, you try to emulate some output. So input-output relation. This is the open loop setting. And the interesting point of the reservoir computing is that because we are not using back propagation, when you use back propagation, then the middle layer is also optimized for, so tuned for this specific task. So for example, when you try to implement incremental learning or multitasking, sometimes these tasks interfere in the middle layer, this recurrent neural network part. But in the reservoir computing approach, because this part is not tuned for some specific task, and we can just attach the readout part and tune only the readout part, we can implement multitasking very safely without considering the catastrophic forgetting danger, and very easily. This is the interest point of the open loop setting for the reservoir. And for the closed loop setting, just like the open loop case, we inject the input and drive the reservoir dynamics, and you use a response, and you adjust the readout part psi, and you generate the output. But this output is injected as a next input. By doing this, you can emulate some autonomous dynamical system. In this case, this is an input-driven dynamical system. But this case, you can emulate some autonomous dynamical system. And to train this, we do the same. So in the training phase, we just cut off the feedback loop. And you have some target dynamical system. So you just inject the response of the target dynamical system, YK, as an input. Then you try to predict the next state of the target dynamical system. And you only tune this readout part. And then this is called teacher forcing. And in the training phase, in the evaluation phase, you close the loop. And you emulate the autonomous dynamical system. So today, we use both approaches. And so this is the basics to understand today's presentation. Okay, and also we have, this part is very, what should I say, very important to understand the mechanism of the reservoir computing. So in the previous slides, I said about the nonlinearity in the memory of the reservoir dynamics, but that's about the expressiveness of the network. But in this slide, I would like to talk about the prerequisite to implement some reliable computation. And it is related to the reproducibility of the response. So if you want to implement computation to the system, at least you need to guarantee the reproducibility of the response, right? Because when you inject the input, then you need to obtain the same response from the system. Otherwise, you cannot implement the reliable computation to the system. And this situation is very, what should I say, very tricky to have when you use dynamical system. As you know, we are now focusing on the dynamical, high dimensional nonlinear dynamical system as a computational substrate. So we need to have specific condition to use this system as a reliable computational substrate. And this property is called echo state property in the reservoir computing community. So yeah, let's summarize what is going on in this reservoir computing. So at first we have the target function, because this is the, in general, we are now targeting the function that requires memory. So basically, we can say that the target function is like can be expressed like this. So this function takes previous input streams as input and want to generate some output. So this is the target function that we want to emulate by using a recurrent neural network, the reservoir system. And in the reservoir system, we have explained that we have reservoir dynamics, input-driven reservoir dynamics. Using the response, by adjusting this psi, we want to output this one. So by using this input-driven dynamical system, we want to emulate the G. This is what I have been explaining in the previous slides. And here, as you know, in general, the behavior of dynamical system depends on the initial condition. And but as I explained, we want to have the same response every time we inject some identical input. In that case, it requires some synchronization phenomena. So this is called generalized synchronization between input series and response. And this property is called echo state property. So it means that the response can be expressed only as a function of previous input series. This is called echo state property. And to investigate whether your reservoir has the echo state property, we usually investigate whether your system shows some common signal-induced synchronization. So it means that you start your reservoir from different initial condition, you inject the same identical input series, and check whether your reservoir system start to show the same response. If it shows the same response, then common signal-induced synchronization occurs. And also, you can check the Lyapunov exponent if you analyze the conditional Lyapunov exponent of a system, and if it shows negative, then it has this kind of property. Okay, then so if you have this echo state property, it means that your system is now response is expressed like this. And this part is called echo function in reservoir computing community. And as you can see, if you bring this term here, then and this echo function is a very intrinsic property of the reservoir. So when you determine the reservoir system, then this echo function simultaneously is determined. So by putting this term here, you can see that we have intrinsic property of the reservoir, and also experiment is adjusting this readout part. So by adjusting this phi and psi, we want to emulate G. This is a reservoir computing. Summary of the reservoir computing. Okay, so let's see some example. So let's see some open loop example, open loop setting example. So for example, by using this reservoir computing scheme, we have investigated whether we can emulate some sensors. And in this case, this work is the collaboration work with Bridgestone. And we have McKibben type pneumatic actuator. And as you know, it's made of rubber, and we incorporated some carbon nanotube in the rubber. And now we can detect the resistance of the pneumatic actuator. According to the, so when you pressurize this pneumatic actuator, the rubber part deforms. And according to the body dynamics of this material, it shows some resistance change. So by taking this resistance and applied pressure, we inject these values to the reservoir and then try to predict the length of this pump. And usually this length is measured by using this laser displacement meter. But of course, these sensory devices are rigid. So we want to detach these devices to maintain the softness of the system. So we try to emulate this laser displacement meter by using this reservoir computing approach. Then as you can see, when these are the inputs, so the pressure and the measured resistance from this pump, you inject these values as an input, and these are the outputs. So the black line is a target, and the red line is the system output. As you can see, it's almost perfectly predicts the target value. And the difficulty here is that it's very famous, but pneumatic actuator shows some hysteresis. So it means that even if you have some current value state of the pneumatic actuator, you cannot predict, you cannot uniquely determine the length. So it has some context dependency, but because this reservoir part can somehow deal with this memory part, we can nicely predict the length of the pump without using these sensors. This is the example. Second example is a closed loop. So this is a famous example from Oki Spot's team. So we use these nonlinear oscillators to design the locomotion pattern of the bio-inspired robots. In this case, we are showing the salamander robots. So for example, walking behavior and swimming behavior is somehow controlled by these kind of nonlinear oscillators. And we need to somehow design all these couplings to realize some bio-inspired locomotion pattern. So these response, so by using these nonlinear oscillators, we control these joints. And these joints should be nicely coordinated to realize this kind of realistic locomotion style. And also it's better that we have some switching of the oscillatory patterns. So according to the environmental change, it's better that we switch the locomotion style. And this kind of locomotion control can be also implemented by using reservoir computing, of course. So here is the example. So in the previous case, we needed to have some kind of a good design of the nonlinear oscillators coupling part, but we don't have this kind of things right now. We have random complex dynamics as a reservoir. And this time we use this kind of continuous version of eco-state network, but that's not the point. So we use very complex dynamics in the reservoir part, and we only adjust this readout part. And the task is like this. So according to the input, we assume that this is a sensory input, so coming from the environment. So we inject some input. Then according to this input, this reservoir should output some corresponding oscillatory patterns. So if we inject some A, then this reservoir should output some oscillatory pattern A. And we inject several inputs, and this reservoir should output corresponding oscillatory patterns. And important point is that we prepare the complex dynamics in the reservoir part, and we only tune the readout part. Let's see some example. Right now, there's no input. We inject input A, then it goes to the attractor A, B, and it goes to B, and C, and it goes to C. And if you release the input, then it goes back to the original intrinsic dynamics. So basically, reservoir computing approach provides us the high operability to harness the complex dynamics. That's the message. And let's see some more complicated case. So in the previous case, we injected the input externally, but now we want to internalize this input command. So internalize means, so basically, according to this input, we could switch this oscillatory pattern, right? But maybe we want to switch these oscillatory patterns by the system itself. So for example, if we want to switch ABC autonomously, so this switching can be also controlled autonomously by this by using this feedback loop. And also this part is tuned. So this readout part is tuned to output the planned oscillatory switching. So let's see some examples. Please check this paper for details. We did lots of what should I say, interesting tricks to implement these kind of things, but I won't go into detail today. Please check this paper. But basically, the message is the same. So please check. So we implemented 3 research curve. So according to the input, 3 input research curve is outputted. But those input command is also autonomously controlled by using the same reservoir dynamics. This part is the, we picked up 10 response of the nodes from the reservoir, representative nodes. And in this case, so we can implement lots of oscillatory patterns. We show that we can implement 10 oscillatory patterns by using 1 big reservoir. So it means that we can design the fine structure of the limit cycle inside. So we can connect all these small structures. We design small structures, and we can connect all these things and form the larger limit cycle. And here we show that we can also implement the context-dependent switching of this attractor. Okay, so please check this paper for details. So basically, the main point is that by using reservoir computing approach, we can harness the complex dynamics for our computational purpose. That's the message. And the second important concept is the concept of embodiment. And I assume that we all familiar with this concept, so I only check the main points. So basically, to understand the behavior control of animals or robots, this dynamic coupling between controller brain and body and the environment is crucial. And we should not only consider the controller to understand the behavior control. And let's see some extreme example, very famous example to confirm the importance of this concept. So this is the passive dynamic walker, very famous benchmark platform of this community. So we have extremely natural walking behavior, but astonishingly, this robot does not have controller. It has a well-designed body and well-designed environment. And only by using physical law, it walks naturally. So somehow we can say that this, what should I say, this morphology of the body is already computing something required for natural walking behavior. So the message here is functionality can be partially outsourced to the physical body. And this property is not limited to the robotic body, but we can find nice example. This one is also famous example, the dead trout example. So you put dead fish in the water tank and you generate flow, then this dead fish starts to swim naturally. And as you can see, so because this fish is dead, we can confirm that the brain part is not functioning, but this dead body has the natural morphology and material property. And by using this natural material property and form of this fish morphology, and also actually it has a cylinder here. So when you generate flow, it generates some specific vortex in the water medium. So using this complex dynamics in the water, and also with the interaction with this material property, it can generate this kind of a natural swimming motion. And in this case also, we can outsource the functionality to the body and the environment if you nicely design the body part. That's the message. Okay, so we checked the mechanism of reservoir computing, and also we checked the importance of embodiment. We can outsource the functionality if we design the body nicely. Okay, so let's check what happens if we combine these two concepts. And I would like to introduce the concept of physical reservoir computing. So we have soft robotics. So we have lots of soft robots developed worldwide recently, and there are lots of good points. And I see many speakers are talking about soft robots today. So I won't go into detail, but basically, because the body is soft, it won't damage people. So it can be used for those human-robot interaction, rescue robot, or biomedical application. I think that's a promising direction to take. But of course, not only good points, but there's difficulties, of course. And the difficulties are, it's very difficult to control. And it generally shows diverse body dynamics, as we saw in the first slide. And these dynamics include nonlinearity and memory. And as I explained earlier, but in the reservoir computing framework, these properties is somehow a good property that increases the computational power of the system. So the bad point of the soft robot control is a good point of the reservoir computing system. Then why not realize this kind of, what about this kind of idea? So let's just directly use this diverse body dynamics of soft robotic arm as a reservoir. And this is an example of physical reservoir computing. So this left-hand side is the conventional reservoir computing. So as I explained, if we have sufficient nonlinearity memory in the reservoir part, we can only adjust this readout part, and we can use this intrinsic dynamics for your computational purpose. And just like the conventional reservoir computing, we inject the input as a motor command, and you generate the soft body dynamics, diverse soft body dynamics, and you monitor this body dynamics by using the embedded sensors, for example. And just like the conventional reservoir, you adjust this readout part, sensory readings, and then use this body dynamics for your computational purpose. This is the physical reservoir computing. So the interesting point is, usually this kind of reservoir is driven inside your PC by using some algorithm. But this kind of algorithmic procedure is completely outsourced to the physical dynamics, natural physical dynamics. You let this physical dynamics compute something, and then you use the results and adjust the results, and you use this computational purpose, dynamics for your computational purpose. And also, as we saw, this kind of reservoir computing system is frequently used to implement some closed loop control, as I as we saw earlier. So we can implement some autonomous oscillators, for example. So if we incorporate some feedback loop from the output to the next input, and if this part can be used as a reservoir, then it means that we can implement some closed loop setting, closed loop control for like this kind of central pattern generator like control by using its own motion. If we can do that, then we can potentially bypass the PC, which should be externally provided. So these points are very interesting, and I have been constantly showing that this idea works in these papers. So please check these papers for details. Let's see some example today. So this is the example of the soft robotic arm. So we have silicon arm, and we embed 10 bending sensors, 5 bending sensors in this side and other resting the other side. And we have 10 bending sensors. And we also have the motor, one motor in the base part, and it rotates like this. And it generates some soft body dynamics. And this bending sensor detects a local bend and sends the value to the board in real time. And the input can be set in a really various settings, but today we only focus on the binary setting. So if the motor command says 0, then this motor should bring this base part to the right-hand side. And if the motor command says 1, then this base part should bring this base to this motor should bring this base to the left-hand side. We implement binary input. And at first, we would like to demonstrate whether this part, this arm part, positively contributes as a computational resource. So we assign some tasks like a function that requires memory and nonlinearity. Then because experimenter is externally adjusting this linear and static readout, if this system can emulate some function that requires memory and nonlinearity, then we can confirm that this nonlinearity and memory is coming from this octopus arm. So by doing this kind of investigation, we try to infer the computational power of this octopus arm. And we came back to the first slide. So we are now injecting the random binary motor command input as an input. And this one is the reservoir. We're going to use this dynamics as a reservoir. And here we set some multitasking condition. So we inject this binary input trees, and we want to emulate several Boolean functions. And for the Boolean function, we tested two types of Boolean function. First one is the short-term memory task. So this means that by using the reservoir, you need to reproduce the previous input. So you can directly check whether the current state of the reservoir has a memory of the previous input. If you can emulate, if you can output the previous input, then it means that the current state of the arm somehow includes the information about the previous input. We can investigate the memory capacity by using this task. The second one is the n-bit parity checker. So this task also requires memory, but the mapping is intrinsically nonlinear. So if you can implement this task, then you can check whether the system has nonlinearity or not. And this is the results. So we have body, soft body dynamics, and we have, this is the input, binary input, and we have sensory time series, and this is a reservoir. And by using these and putting some linear weights, we are now emulating these Boolean functions in a multitasking manner. Now, as you can see, so this n, parameter n, shows a difficulty of the task. So when the n is larger, it requires more memory. So as you can see, for the short-term memory task, you can see that, so the black line is target output, the red line is system output. For n equal 1 and 2, the performance is almost perfect. So it can remember 1 time step and 2 time steps before input perfectly. And then if you increase the parameter n, the performance starts to degrade. In the n-bit parity checker case, it can use, so the n equal 1 case is perfect. It means that the basic XOR task can be implemented perfectly. So that's the, what should I say, the representative nonlinear mapping. It can emulate this kind of mapping. And according to the increase of n, the performance degrades. So we saw that although it has some limitations, so please, if you're interested in this work, please check this paper for details. This paper investigates the computational power of this soft robotic arm in detail. And intuitively, I would like to explain what is going on in this soft robotic arm. So what does it mean to have memory in this arm? So intuitively saying, this task means that by checking the shape of the current arm, can you reproduce what was happening in the motor part? Because motor part is the input, right? So the task requires that by checking the shape means because we have bending sensors. So by collecting these bending sensors, we can somehow correspond this sensory value to the shape, right? So by checking the shape, can we reproduce the previous inputs? That's the task we are solving. And as you can see, intuitively, of course, we can infer, because for example, if we have this kind of shape currently, then we can infer that, so motor moved from here to here, here to here. So we can infer that, so the previous motor command was behaving like this. In this case, because this kind of, so the effect of this actuation propagates from the base to the tip with delay, we can say that, so the motor, by checking this the shape and the bending, we can say that, so the motor behave like this, or here, no, like this. In this case, this, because we have 3 bends. That's the intuitive explanation. And the interesting point is that we cannot implement this kind of information processing if you use the rigid stick, because if you have a stick and if you embed sensors in the rigid stick, it won't deform according to the movement. So it won't encode any kind of information from the previous input. Even if you check the state of the rigid body, there's no memory in the body. So this one suggests the interesting point using the soft body. And also recently, we showed that our arm has equal state property. And also, we found that the environment medium condition is crucial. So, and the detail can be found in this paper, recently accepted in RoboSoft 2022. So please check, please attend this conference if you want to know the details. But here, what we are testing is, so as I explained, to check whether the system have equal-state property, we need to check, it's better to check the common signal in this synchronization. So by starting from the different initial condition, we inject the same input command. And we now are overlaying the video. And as you can see, for the top water case and seawater case, somehow the behavior of the arm overlaps. But in the condition of air, so we replace this water medium and we just vibrated the motor in the air condition. Then as you can see, there's no reproducibility. So we show that our octopus arm can implement computation only in the condition of the water and seawater condition. If you vibrate our octopus arm in the air condition, it cannot implement reservoir computing. So environmental condition was also important. Okay, now, so we show that we have some amount of computational power in the soft robotic arm. And we want to implement the closed loop setting. And just like the previous case, we adjust this readout part and generate the output, and output is injected as a next input. And here we implement this kind of oscillatory pattern. And this is the results. So we could implement this closed loop control directly to this body. And we provided some manual perturbation. And because this arm part is acting like a brain right now, when you perturb, then the output is directly perturbed, of course. But if you stop perturbation, then you can check that it goes back to the original trajectory. So we can say, yes? Any question? By the way, so it's until 45, right? So we need to hurry.
Yeah, please continue.
Yes. Okay, so we checked that we can implement closed loop control by using this framework. And recently, we also implemented this framework to make a fish robot. And this one was published in Artificial Life Conference last year. And this technique is not only for this kind of fish-like or octopus arm-like shape, but we can implement this approach into some quadruped robot. So in this work, we made some spine part by using silicon, and this silicon embeds this string, and we have motor, and by pulling this string, we induce some deformation of the spine part and generate some locomotion pattern. And by using this dynamics as a reservoir, we implemented some closed loop control. And we show that we can embed lots of gates by using this spine reservoir. Please check this paper for details. And also recently, we found that the wing of the flying robots can be also used as a reservoir. And now, please check the paper for details, but with collaboration with the scientists from Takei Sensei from the flexible sensor community, we incorporated flexible sensor directly to this wing. And we need to be careful not to damage the natural dynamics. So we need a flexible sensor. And we found that these wing dynamics can act as a natural classifier of the wind direction. And as you know, this wing is not made for wind direction detector, but it's just a wing to fly. So this is also suggesting the flexibility of this physical reservoir computing framework. And this is also the recent work that we showed that we can transfer the computation to the distant place. So as I explained, if we consider the mechanism of the physical reservoir computing, the important point is a generalized synchronization. So if we can form this kind of synchronization relation, then we found that we can somehow transfer the computation to the spatially distant place. But we don't have enough time to explain. So please check this paper for details. Okay, so this is the summary. So by incorporating the soft materials, we can use soft body dynamics as the computational device. And the message here is, so we started from the randomly coupled virtual echo state network. But when we use the real robots as reservoir, then it's not random at all. It has some specific shape, morphology. So it means that, because it means that it is biased somehow. And it means that this specific shape has some preference, some specific task to solve. So by using this physical reservoir computing framework, we are thinking that we can understand why we need this kind of shape from computational perspective. Yeah, and recently we showed that the real single-celled organism can be also used as a computational resource, as a reservoir. And in this case also, we checked that this system shows some common signal-induced synchronization. And this first author, Ushio-san, is ecologist. He can deal with this real system, real biological system. He made this kind of system and demonstrated that actually this organism called tetrahymena can be used as a physical reservoir. And there are lots of physical reservoirs developed worldwide. Today, we only introduced this soft robots case, but there's liquid brain, very famous example also. And there are real cultural neural networks are also used as a physical reservoir recently. And of course, this approach is now a hot topic in neuromorphic device community. And there are four major approaches. First one is photonic reservoir using laser. So you can implement extremely high-speed computation by using laser dynamics. And another approach is immaterial reservoirs. So you implement this echo state network-like network structure in the material. And there are lots of types, like using carbon nanotube, atomic switch network. And you can implement very low energy, low cost chip, and you can implement these using these natural complex dynamics and implement this low cost computation. And the third approach is spintronics reservoirs. So in spintronics reservoir, there are lots of types, but for example, you can use spin torque oscillators, nonlinear oscillators as a reservoir. And of course, it's you can implement high-speed computation, and also you can implement because it is very tiny. You can just implement lots of many oscillators, and also it's found that these spintronics are robust to radioactive environment. So you can use this reservoir in the radioactive environment if you use this spintronics reservoir. And finally, we're now working on these quantum reservoirs. So you can use these quantum many-body systems dynamics as a reservoir. And you can implement quantum tasks by using directly these quantum dynamics. Okay, and these works are summarized in this book. And so if you are interested, please check this book. Okay, and finally, I would like to acknowledge all the collaborators and RC seminar group members. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
Many thanks for your presentation, Kohei. It's like very fascinating work. We also do a couple of, we are about to start some work in our lab also related to reservoir computing. And we also struggle with this like environment, with the choice of the environment, with the choice of the reservoir itself. Can you like say like ongoing challenges and what is you think that the future direction and quantify in some sense like what is the good reservoir? What is the good reservoir? Yeah.
Well, so basically, as I explained, if you can have equal state property, then in terms of implementing reliable computation, that's a good reservoir, I can say. But on the other hand, that's really a too promising approach to take. And as you know, there are lots of variations. For example, if you use chaotic reservoir, then there are lots of acrobatic approach invented recently. So it depends. So it depends on what you are focusing on right now. But if you want to just implement some reservoir computing approach, then equal state property should be checked at first. That's my answer.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your response. We have a few questions in the chat. Maybe you don't have much time, but we can go through and then select one or two that you like to answer, that you think that important.
Could you pick up one? I cannot check all the things. It has. Do you have any important questions here?
So yeah. If we take a summary that they are asking about the implementation, a couple of questions about. Yeah. Does it matter like the initialization and then the choice of connection and the structure of the network and all?
So okay. So in terms of initialization means that's good points, and it's related to equal state properties. So maybe he's asking that because we are using dynamical system as a computational substrate, because the behavior is somehow depends on the initial condition of these physical the reservoir dynamics. But as I explained, if you have some equal state property, then it means that the behavior is not does not depend on the initial condition anymore. It's a function of input series. So if you can synchronize your response of the physical reservoir with your input time series, then that's the first stage. At first, it's better that you check whether your reservoir can hold this equal state property.
Yeah, okay. Another interesting question is what kind of reservoirs physical body can and cannot achieve? Would this explain
again, please?
Why we need brain or computer? Yes, the last question in the chat.
The last question: what kind of reservoirs physical body can and cannot achieve? Would this explain why we need brain or computer? This is very with this why we need. Yeah, so basically, that's very good question. So, for example, as I show, so the soft body is a very good reservoir, but it shows equal state property. But brain shows, for example, chaotic dynamics. And from the reservoir computing point of view, to exploit chaotic dynamics, you need to have a trick. So as a first stage, what should I say? So in the current technique of reservoir computing, of course, chaotic dynamics can be used. But as a first stage, it's important to have this equal-state property. Then body part does not show, usually does not show chaotic dynamics. So the body part can be used as a conventional reservoir, and the brain part has some different additional potential to bring. Yeah, it has a different property, I would say, yes, because it shows chaotic dynamics.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. Our next session is will be starting at 10 a.m. in 5 minutes. So yeah, so
thank you very much. I couldn't answer all these questions.
Yeah. Please go through in the chat, and maybe you can answer them like by writing the responses. Yeah. Thank you for your talk.
Thank you very much. See you.